Have you tried to do this? Did you know that your genes help determine whether or not you can roll your tongue? Our DNA contributes to many other traits, from our height and weight to the color of our skin and eyes. Differences in our DNA cause one person to have brown eyes and another blue eyes. Every body function is encoded by DNA. Although our DNA is inherited from our parents, it does change from one generation to the next. For example, through selective breeding, humans have developed corn from a wild grass. In this chapter, we will introduce the structure of DNA, how it is used as a blueprint, and how it is modified through traditional and modern genetic engineering methods.
This chapter is about genetics. So your genes help determine physical traits, your eye color, can you roll your tongue or not, your skin color, your height, your weight. Every single body function is encoded in your genes, which are your DNA. We'll look at how DNA is inherited from one generation to the next, as well as how you can alter DNA artificially with genetic modification and leading to GMOs, genetically modified organisms. Genetically modified organisms are part of your daily life in your foods. These are the common foods in the U.S. that are genetically modified, so GMOs, soy, corn, cotton, and vegetable oil. Because many processed foods contain soy protein or high fructose corn syrup that's been processed from corn, it's estimated that 60 to 70% of processed foods in the grocery store include at least one of these GMOs. So that's led to the pushback of non-GMO foods. These types of labeling, similar to recycling labels, they're not mandated by the government, that companies on their own decide to put the GMO labeling or non-GMO labeling on their foods to alert consumers. We'll be looking at the chemistry of genetic modification and how this goes on in corn and asking, is this healthy, unhealthy? Is it a problem at all? Part of the labeling debate is because GMOs are called Frankenfoods, which is due to the fact that these are foods developed of parts from different organisms, different foods. Based on the novel Frankenstein,
in which a scientist puts together the best parts of a man, strong, smart, and yet it turns out that that's a monster.
And that's at the heart of genetic modification, which is scientists taking the best parts of different organisms, like a bacteria that's resistant to insects, and inserting the genetics of that into a corn so that now you have a corn that's resistant to insects. So that's at the heart of genetic modification, but there's a fear. Is this going to create some Frankenstein monster of a corn? Whether or not to require labeling of GMOs in the U.S. has been proposed, but not enacted at the national, state, or local levels. Those in favor of labeling emphasize consumers' right to know what's in their food. Those opposed point out the expense and logistical difficulties of labeling. Science behind it is that there are no significant differences have been found between GMOs and non-GMO foods. Research shows that GMO organisms are equally as nutritious and healthy, and that they don't lack any nutrition. There's no danger coming from them. You can't get cancer. You can't get any kind of disease from GMO organisms or GMO foods. Learned that 30% of Earth's land surface is used for livestock, plus another 10% for farming. And all that space, why so much space? Because there are a lot of people to feed. In an attempt to find better and easier to grow corn that can grow on less space or under harsher conditions, scientists have genetically modified corn so that it can grow faster, closer together, in theory produce healthier crops or more corn for the growing needs of humanity. The same is true for soybeans, cotton, canola, potatoes, tomatoes, and more. That genetic modification has been introduced to vegetables and plants in order to be able to grow more and make them better fit our needs. This is all possible because of the science behind our genetics. So this is the model of DNA. It's a complicated model, but actually very basic. So we'll be breaking down the structure and the components of the DNA double helix.
What you can't see on the structure are genes. A gene is a segment of the DNA that codes for a protein, and a protein can have a specific function or a specific trait. Organisms generally have traits that are determined by more than one gene, and so therefore organisms have hundreds, thousands of genes on their DNA. We'll look at the chemistry of the DNA, and because it's relatively simple, you can also easily engineer the DNA.